Store. If you have an iPhone or iPad, go to Apple App Store. It's that simple. We have 3 streaming sites. Just type in TuneIn Radio or Radio Garden or Streema. That's STREEMA. Once the app is downloaded, type in and search for DZRJ. And now you can choose and enjoy DZRJ 810 AM and RJFM 100.3 anytime and anywhere. Hey, it's free.
You are watching the multi-awarded Radio Bandido TV on channel 224 Sky Cable and TV Plus boxes. Simulcast on DZRJ 810 AM. Informing, advising, and entertaining the Filipinos and OFWs around the world. Streaming live on www.facebook.com/DZRJ 810 AM or on YouTube, channel DZRJ 810 AM Radio Bandido.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.
Hello, Philippines, and welcome to the World News Jam right here on DZRJ Radio and Radio Bandito TV here in the beautiful Makati area of Manila. My name is 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗿. Today we will be talking about the biggest stories going on outside of the Philippines, the stuff that is the most popular this week on the national news scene. Now, I know already what you are going to say. Isn't the U.S. president dominating the news cycle this week? And the answer is yes. Yes, he is. So that's what we will be talking about mostly. Now, I know a lot of you are asking me about the Super Bowl. Most importantly, what is Taylor Swift going to wear? But I can't actually tell you because the Super Bowl is actually going on right this minute. So news about Taylor Swift and Taylor Swift's boyfriend. Is he going to ask her to marry him at the Super Bowl? Is she going to eat fries or chips or both? In any case, there was a story I didn't get to last week, and I wanted to update you on a few things. Now, I know we haven't talked about the war in Ukraine much lately, but it's still going on and it's still bad. Supposedly this week, the U.S. president and Russian president just now had a talk about what it would take to stop this war. Of course, Russia can neither confirm nor deny this conversation ever happened. But Trump said it did, and he's been really pushing for this ceasefire. He also said that he would keep supplying Ukrainian weapons in exchange for minerals that they have there underground in the Ukraine. Can't have any more guns unless you give us some of your, uranium and stuff. And what about the new sanctions he was talking about? Well, in the meantime, Russia's been constructing a new naval base, mostly because Ukraine has taken out about a third of their naval bases in the Black Sea. The problem is where the naval base is. It's actually partly in the country of Georgia, but that the area that the base is on is currently controlled by Russian-backed separatists. So if Russia were to finish the naval base and then Ukraine attacks it, get what I'm saying? Georgia. Well, there's another problem. Most land-based trade routes going from Europe to China run through Russia. But of course, that trade route is cut off due to the sanctions that are cutting off the trade in Russia. So the best trade route is running right through the middle corridor, which goes through, you guessed it again, Georgia. Georgia was working on a deep sea port there, but now Russia is building a base just 1 hour north of there. They're also widening the access points to accommodate large vessels. This has problems written all over it. Gives the ability for Russia to bring in very large missiles. And if the Ukraine were to attack there, which they would be attacking the country of Georgia. But the biggest issue is whoever controls that area controls just not the ability for Russia to move things in and out, but like I said, it's the trade route for China to bring shipments into Europe. This is major, and all this could be disrupted if Russia is able to control this area. I mean, before, Russia held the keys to the lucrative trade routes through its country, which 85% of everything passed through. But that sweet deal is over now, so the route is worth big revenues to Georgia. But not if there's a Russian naval base just around the corner. As I said, Donald Trump is currently trying to inject himself in the war. Remember, he said leading up to the election that he would end the war in a day. Well, looks like that's not going to happen. Now, a week before, Trump threatened new sanctions on Russia if they would not agree to a ceasefire. But Russia was kind of like, so what? They said Trump likes to threaten, but that doesn't mean he will actually do anything. Now, Trump said, settle now and stop this ridiculous war. It's only going to get worse. If we didn't make a deal and we don't make a deal soon, I will have no other choice to put high levels of taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States and various participating countries. He went on, let's get this war, which never should have started if I were president, over with. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. And the easy way is always better. It's time to make a deal. End quote. But of course, doing a ceasefire is going to be very complicated. Putin doesn't trust Zelensky, and nobody trusts Putin. Zelensky knows that if there's going to be a ceasefire, he's going to have to give up something, maybe Kursk. And he knows that if he does, Putin could just take more. He has said that he needs to have at least 200,000 peacekeeping troops on the ground before any ceasefire could be agreed to. And U.S. troops would need to be mixed in with that. Also, as we all know, even if Trump is talking a big talk right now, he and Putin are very close. He had a number of calls to Putin during his off season as president. The reason I'm saying is that part of this tough talk could very well be Putin's idea. Because one other thing that Trump has suggested is that if there is a ceasefire, then there should also be an election in the Ukraine at that time. What better way to get Putin back to a candidate in as the president of the Ukraine than have an election? Remember the guy who was president before Zelensky? Maybe this would be Putin's chance to get another guy in there, make it much easier to work with, and would not, under any circumstances, be interested in joining NATO. Right now, that's a big problem with Zelensky. He wants to join NATO, and NATO would accept the Ukraine, but only after the war is over. But then there's another factor. Many hardline Russians will not accept even a partial control of the border area. This could be a factor of killing any kind of ceasefire, even if Putin wants it. They consider giving up any parts of the border as a defeat. And if that's true, what was the purpose of doing the war in the first place if you'll give up 4 regions at the border that Russia currently controls? Like I said, this might not be as easy as Trump thinks it will be. If the U.S. puts more sanctions on Russia, so what? Russia's used to it. But the problem is, how many more people have to die before these two guys come to an agreement? Currently, no one is winning the war. The Russian forces are losing huge numbers of soldiers per day, and North Korea, the most recent player in the war, is even losing guys. The country of Ukraine has, of course, been devastated, not just militarily, but also people. There was an article I was reading about the people in Ukraine that have just disappeared. 61,000 Ukrainians just simply missing. They say that when troops just disappear, there's a good chance that they will be used in some kind of exchange for prisoners of war, some deal later on. But usually when it comes to civilians, they're just never seen again. There's so many stories of Russian soldiers coming into towns and just taking people. There's a story of a couple that was taken from their village, leaving behind their children, which got out actually earlier. 4 months later, a woman was dropped off at a hospital. No clothes, no papers. She was unconscious. She eventually died in the hospital. It was the mother. The husband has never been found. The problem is the way the Russian military works. They come into a town and establish rule. Then some of the people in the town, they tell the Russians to leave, and they spit at them and wave Ukrainian flags at them. Then without warning, the Russians will round up all these people that have stood up against them, and they will disappear. This is to deter any others from doing the same thing. Anyone considered loyal to Kiev is considered a traitor to Russia. This couple I was talking about, their daughter fled the city first, but then the parents stayed behind. They had built a business there. They didn't want to leave. Her mother had faith that the Ukrainian military would eventually liberate them from the Russians, but as time went by, the Ukrainians never came. Eventually, her mother's name showed up on a list. She was listed as a waiter. A waiter is someone waiting for the Ukrainian military to come. She was also known as giving money for the war effort. Eventually, her and her husband were taken. When the daughter finally found out that her mother was left in the hospital, well, it was already too late. There was no way to get to her without endangering herself. The hospital report said that she died of pneumonia, but everybody knows that anyone taken into custody is tortured. International law states that if a civilian is taken into the government of that citizen must be notified. But Russia doesn't follow any of these rules. Supposedly, there are international staff in Russia to check in on prisoners, but Russia makes it very difficult to even know who is there. Sometimes people actually return, but it's rare. The ones that actually do return tell stories of living in hell, living on a glass of water and a small bowl of buckwheat. And when they complain of starving, they are told that if they complain, eventually they would be shot. If they get back to the Ukraine, they're suffering from extreme weight loss and malnutrition. For right now, the daughter of the couple that was taken, well, she still hopes that her father will one day be found alive, but her mother is dead, and she will never see the body, nor be able to have a funeral. However, she will always remember her mother as a hero to the Ukraine. And this is 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗿 on the World News Jam on DZRJ Radio. All right, let's see what's going on in the U.S. Before we get to the big stuff, though, one of the changes Trump has made this week is he has taken all mentions of transgenders off the government websites. If you remember week before last, Trump signed an executive order making it so the United States government only recognizes two genders, male and female. So if you look at any U.S. government websites, they now read LGB only. No T, no Q, no plus. Also, any references of gender-correct pronouns, such as the use of they, them, or theirs, are no longer in use. But the big transgender story this week was Trump signed an executive order banning schools from allowing transgender athletes from participating in any kind of women's sports. Basically, not allowing a person born as a male to enter any sport in a school that is designed for women. And this is no matter when the athlete transitioned to a separate gender. Now, I've said on the show several times that men that transition late in their adolescence development, such as over the age of 16, should, in my opinion, not be allowed to participate in women's sports because the skeletal structure is already formed and cannot be reversed. However, a male that is transitioned before puberty is okay to play in women's sports because with correct hormone therapy, the boy's body cannot develop into a man's body. Remember, we are all women in the womb, and you can remain a woman if you stop the male chromosomes from developing soon enough. If you study the science, you can see that boys and girls have similar strength and agility up to a certain age. In fact, you might even say that women have an advancement because their body develops faster. But once that time has passed, there is no way to change the effect of puberty using the standard transitioning processes. Even taking testosterone blockers, it can change one's appearance, the ability to put on muscle, but not the possibility of acquiring non-equal physical strength. Some of this is considered opinions, but, it's kind of true. We have a lot of stories on the subject because there are rules in sports that clearly are unfair to women. I know the U.S. NCAA swimming rules, also weightlifting and UFC fighting. This is where a man is changed his sex around 2 years before starting to compete in women's sports. They may feel like a woman, dress like a woman, but in essence, they are still a man and have an unfair advantage. But the new order says that no one born as a male can ever enter a woman's sport, thus can never be a woman. So even if the athlete has truly changed their gender, muscle structure, bone density, testosterone levels to that of a woman, they will still not be able to compete. Now, how can Trump stop a school from allowing an athlete to do this? Well, if the school allows a transgender athlete under any and all circumstances to compete, Trump will cut any government funds going to that school. Also, any transgender coming into the country with their team for any kind of event will not be allowed to participate as part of a federal law. Now, of course, there is going to be some legal challenges on all of this order, especially the interpretation of Title IX that says that the U.S. law forbids sexual discrimination in education. But remember, the new Trump order removed any other gender other than male or female. Thus, since the U.S. now doesn't recognize any type of transgender, then it can't fall under anti-discrimination law because there's only two genders. In the past, several states already had transgender policies not allowing transgendered men to play in a women's sport. However, when challenged in court, many times the transgender wins the right to play in the women's sport because of Title IX and the NCAA rules. Rules that have given the NCAA a lot of criticism. But now the NCAA won't need to make those decisions and won't have to enforce them. It's a federal mandate through executive order. No Congress, no Senate. So besides sports, what about other groups such as the military? Before, in his first term, Trump had banned transgender people from entering the military. However, Joe Biden reversed that law, allowing transgenders to be in the military. But some of those people had built distinguished careers in their jobs in the military. But now that Trump is back, he's again signing an executive order banning transgender people from entering the military. And if you are already in the military and you are a transgender, you will most likely be discharged. Doesn't matter how many years you have been there or at what rank you are. Joe Biden had been more compassionate toward the transgenders in the military. In regards to the school athletes, Biden said it's okay in school as long as the school deemed that the athlete did not have an unfair advantage. All right, so that's a bit shaky, but it really doesn't matter now because Trump has banned all transgenders from participating in events in their chosen gender. And this is not the end of it. Trump has gone as far as to saying that there's no such thing as a transgendered person. You are your gender that you are born with, and you cannot, under any circumstances, be changed. So, for instance, if you are incarcerated and you have completely transitioned and you have been in the prison of your current gender, you will now be transferred to the prison of your birth gender. This is going to be a real sticky situation. Just this week, a judge ordered that the transfer of 3 transgendered prisoners from the female prison to the male prison be stopped. The judge agreed with the lawyers of the prisoners that moving them would open them up to sexual violence. Also, Trump has been removed all gender-affirming care from all federal prisons. If an inmate is currently in the middle of transition or taking hormonal drugs, they will be forced to stop. One more issue is that Trump has blocked transgender people from using their gender ID on their passports. Transgendered men who have been referencing their gender on their passport as female, even ones for decades, must now have their passport changed to their birth gender. And if you misrepresent your birth gender on your passport, it can be considered a crime. This past Friday, the ACLU filed a lawsuit challenging the new passport laws, saying that the law discriminates against people based on their sex or transgender status, depriving them of their rights to equal protection and privacy. Just imagine if your passport has said female for 40 to 50 years, and now you have to change it to male. But what many are afraid of is what the U.S. starts to implement laws such as those, that maybe they might become like some Arab or African or some Asian countries, making it not only hard to be a transgender person, but also illegal. That sex conversion surgery and medications will eventually be banned in the U.S. This may not be that far away from being a reality. And this is 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗍 on the World News Jam. Thank you for joining us today here on Radio Bandito TV. You know, other realities that may be coming soon. Trump has reiterated again this week the need for the U.S. to take back the Panama Canal. He made a statement this week that China is running the Panama Canal and that it was not originally given to China. He said it was foolishly given to Panama and they violated the agreement, and now we, the U.S., are taking it back. Or something powerful is going to happen. Now, the president of Panama also made it clear that the sovereignty of Panama is not up for debate, and that any concerns over China's issues have been addressed now. Trump saying that Panama violated the agreement is based on this agreement that was made in 1977, which allows the U.S. military to intervene if there is a disruption to the waterway due to internal conflict or a foreign power. In other words, if a foreign country decided to take the Panama Canal by force, the U.S. could intervene. But this is not the case. The company that's running the part of the port in question is named Panama Ports Company. Makes sense. And it's part of a subsidiary of Hong Kong company called C.K. Hutchinson's Holdings. They are one of the largest and most experienced port operators in the world. They run 53 ports in 23 countries, including the United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada. And they are under contract. So China, it doesn't seem, has taken over the Panama Canal. They are just running a part of it. Now, switching gears, in regards to Trump's idea to have the U.S. take over the country of Greenland, well, this week, he still says that's going to happen. He said this past Saturday, quote, "I think we're going to have it." Yeah, the prime minister told the President Trump directly that Greenland is not for sale under any circumstances. Trump said that the people of Greenland were with him on this, although we're not really sure which people he's talking about. He also said, and I quote, "I don't really know what claim Denmark has to it, but it would be very unfriendly act if they didn't allow that to happen because it's for the protection of the free world. I think Greenland will get it because it has to do with the freedom of the world." And Trump goes on. He says, "It has nothing to do with the United States other than we're the one that can provide the freedom. They can't." End quote. Now, Greenland is already a free country, so many are trying to understand what all this means. There was a Danish official that said that the prime minister had a call with Trump and that it was horrendous, that Trump's interest in acquiring Greenland was serious and potentially dangerous. Many have asked, why does Trump even want Greenland so bad? It's true that strategically it has value. It's on the shortest route from the U.S. to Europe and has an American space facility on it. But Trump has touted that by the U.S. taking over Greenland, that it will increase the security of both the U.S. and Greenland. However, many believe that Trump's real main concern about Greenland is Greenland's massive mineral deposits. Greenland is very well known for having very rare earth minerals such as uranium and iron. These minerals could have very high monetary value to whoever owns them. And right now, that's Denmark. But even though Trump is saying that he will just take Greenland and that's what the people of Greenland want, the people of Greenland actually, well, they want their own autonomy. They don't want anyone to own them. They want to own themselves. In the last few years, this has been getting closer and closer to a reality until maybe now when the U.S. is showing interest in just taking the country for its own. If they could get autonomy, then Greenland could make trade deals with the military, like deals with the U.S. on its own. However, as of now, Trump has alluded that he may take Greenland by force if he needs to. So there. But this can't top what the president of Canada said this week, Justin Trudeau. As we know, Trump has said that he wants to make Canada the 51st state of the U.S. Seems he's forgotten about Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, both of whom actually want statehood. However, Canada, so far, seems they have no desire to be a state of the United States. Its population has made it clear that it doesn't want to be connected to the U.S. But the Prime Minister of Canada said this week that Trump is very serious about absorbing Canada. He is making a warning to businesses and labor leaders, warning them that Trump wants Canada's mineral deposits, which they have a vast supply of. Trudeau said they're very aware of our resources, of what we have, and they very much want to be able to benefit from those. He said, but Mr. Trump has it in his mind that one of the easiest ways of doing that is just absorbing our country. Just in case you didn't know, Canada is very rich in minerals that are vital to the transitioning to green energy. Things like lithium and graphite, nickel, copper, cobalt. With Trump making these grand statements of taking over Canada, there's been a rise in patriotism in the country. Many economical problems of Canada and the political infighting that's been going on has been overshadowed by the presence of Trump. Canada has indeed become more united with its parties since its common enemy is now the United States. It's been a surge of polling of people that now are proud to be Canadian. Now, Trump has the idea to hit Canada with huge, massive tax tariffs on its imports, something that would not only hurt Canadians, but also American economies. But just as the tariffs were about to go in effect at 25%, Trump said, wait a moment, we'll back off for 30 days, since you have done some things to protect the border. Basically, Trump is saying that he pressured Canada into making changes at the border because of the threat of a tariff. But in reality, they were already doing this policy on protecting the border. Biden had made a deal with Canada back in December. So basically, Trump caved on his very dangerous tariffs, but he still saved face to his MAGA supporters who would believe it's all his idea. One other interesting bit of news that happened this week on the U.S. acquiring more land is what happened in Israel, of all places. Now, just an update this week. The fifth exchange of Israel's hostages has happened in accordance with the stage one of the ceasefire agreement. Now, 3 Israelis were released this week, looking very thin and weak, but very much alive. One of the daughters of one of the Israeli hostages says she could barely even recognize her father because of his condition. On the other side, 183 Palestinians were released, some of which had been in the Israeli prisons for years, well before the war even started, but this was the deal between the two countries. Here again, the Hamas government said that the Israeli prisoners were in very bad shape. Even the ICRC weighed in that it was very concerned about the conditions of the prisoners on both sides, seeing as how they looked. So there's another exchange due to happen next week with more Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners to be released. In the meantime, the Israeli military has withdrawn from the middle of Gaza. They used to control this area that bisects Gaza from the north and the south, not allowing for travel between the two parts. But as part of the ceasefire agreement, all Israeli forces have now withdrawn from that area. Palestinians can now move somewhat freely through Gaza. But let me tell you, this thing is far from over. In fact, this is just the first stage of trying to end this war. Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, has already ordered for the next stage of the negotiations to start sending his people back to Qatar to start working on what will be the future between Israel and Hamas. Now, Netanyahu has said even this week that he will crush all of the remaining Hamas and free all the remaining hostages. He still continues to call them monsters, which I guess is his way of looking very strong, I guess. By the way, 5 Thai hostages were also released this week and are back in Thailand. 5 farmers in Israel that were there working. They finally made it home. One Thai national still being held in Gaza, but there is hope that he will be released soon. The Thai nationals will receive a one-time payout of $18,000 and a $900 a month pay until the age of 80. The labor minister of Thailand said this will ensure that they do not have to return to Israel again to work. But even though this is great news to hear, it's all overshadowed by the statement of the U.S. president this week. This week, Trump and Netanyahu did a joint press conference. In the press conference, Trump shocked everyone in the room, even what seemed like Netanyahu. He said the Gaza Strip is a wasteland and nothing but rubble, that the U.S. would take over Gaza and own it. In other words, Gaza would become part of the U.S. Trump said the U.S. would clean it out and build beautiful condos there, make it like the Riviera of the Middle East. Now, many in the room of reporters were asking, is he serious? So the question was asked, what about the Palestinians? They have fought for this land for decades. Trump said they would be moved out and resettled in other countries. Of course, the next question, would they be let back in after these beautiful beachfront condos were built? The answer was that it would be for the world's people, which many believe that that's for anyone to move into the new Gaza if you could afford it. Now, this statement goes against every U.S. policy there has ever been in the region. I mean, the Palestinians, they have been fighting for their statehood for so very long. War after war after war. So many are dead. And now the U.S. will just step in and build beachfront condos there? Of course, under international law, this is completely illegal. You can't forcibly transfer populations from an occupied territory, even if you are the U.S. Now, since Trump made these statements, the State Department has been trying to clarify what Trump really means. In other words, trying to clean up this shocker. The White House spokesman said, well, that any displacement would be temporary. And the Secretary of State said the idea was for the Gazians to leave the territory for an interim period while the debris was cleared and reconstruction took place. But this is not exactly what Trump said, is it? In fact, Trump suggested the Palestinians would not be allowed to come back. Now, since this has happened, of course, most of the world has condemned the U.S. taking over and owning Gaza. In fact, the UN, human rights groups, Arabs leaders have all said this will not happen. Trump, though, in his statement, said that everyone loved the idea. But as of now, it's unclear who these people are. Even supposedly Trump's people were just as shocked as everyone else. We still can't tell exactly what's going to happen to Gaza or the West Bank for that matter. The area has not just been bombed, but it's been reduced to rubble. The living conditions there are, well, unlivable. There are chemicals all around and munitions that have contaminated the soil and the water. The UN Environmental Program estimated it would take 21 years to remove and dispose of all the debris in the area. While that's going on, what are people supposed to do? And what about this statement of the U.S. owning one of the most controversial pieces of land in the world? Many have spoken out in the media that this is going to give many terrorist groups a reason to unite and begin to build up again against the fight against the U.S. It also puts a target on the back of every American soldier stationed in a foreign country, especially in the Middle East. But what does this leave the American allies? It puts them in a difficult spot, doesn't it? Many have been pushing for a two-state solution, something that Israel does not want, of course. So in order for that to happen, Israel would really need to be forced. Many thought that that would be the job of the U.S. to do that. But one thing that the Allies didn't see coming was the U.S. owning the Gaza Strip and building high-rises there. Right now, there are very tense negotiations going on in keeping a ceasefire agreement in place and finding a peaceful solution to stop the killing of innocent people. But according to experts, this has put that in jeopardy now. Many countries expected things like this to come from President Trump. In fact, they planned for it. But even so, this is not far from ethnic cleansing of a country. Almost all European leaders have said this cannot and will not happen. The foreign minister of Germany said it would lead to new suffering and new hatred. France said it's a serious violation of international law. Spain said Gaza's land is Gaza. But some countries like the UK are holding back, worried about what Trump might do. Something bad to them, maybe. Britain, for instance, is trying to just charm Trump now and to staying neutral with the UK. If Trump decided to say drop tariffs on the EU, maybe he would spare the UK if they were overly nice to him. Of course, there's that say that Trump was never serious about taking over the Gaza Strip. It's just the usual manipulation of the media, trying to get people to look at this crazy thing, to forget about looking at the real, serious, dangerous things that he's doing now. In other words, look at the U.S. taking over Gaza. You will forget about the cost of eggs, or the fact that the Project 2025 agenda is really happening, or the fact that Elon Musk is rummaging through some of the most sensitive information on one of the most sensitive things in the U.S., its people. This is 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗏 on the World News Jam on Radio Bandito TV. Yes, Elon Musk is showing you what you can get in the U.S. for $250 million. That's what Musk spent on the Trump campaign. And what did he get? Well, what seems like power to do anything he wants, or basically the power of being the president. But Elon is not the president. He's a South African from the time of apartheid. Remember that time when white minorities in South Africa, they owned everything? Well, this week, Elon Musk appeared on Time magazine's front cover. Now, Elon may have loved it, but I'm not sure Trump did. It showed Elon behind the president's desk in the Oval Office. In other words, it was questioning on who's the real president of the U.S. right now. Over the last week, Elon has been doing things that seem illegal. He's going into government office buildings and just taking over, saying, I have the authority here, and just kicking everyone out. There's even been a few physical altercations. One head of security told Musk, the team, that they could not come in the building. And they had kind of a little bit of a tussle. And the next day, that man was fired. In fact, Musk seemed like he's trying to fire everyone now, or offer them some kind of buyout. Just trying to get everyone to leave. But why? Why would Elon want everyone to leave? Well, there's a lot of speculation on that. Elon wants to basically run the country. He wants to dictate regulations and who works for the government. He's head of this 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗏 program, or the Department of Government Efficiency. But the guys working for Elon, well, they're quite a bunch. His gang, as they are called, is between the ages of 19 and 25, mostly made up of computer engineers. They come into the building of whatever government agency and kick everyone out, and then they have the data. The problem is that the data they are checking is very, very sensitive stuff, and none of Elon's guys have any security clearances. They are already found that one of those kids has a connection directly to Russia, and one was making very racist comments on social media, saying he was a racist before it was cool. That guy was fired, and then they hired him back again. There was also one graduate, guy who just graduated high school, and he's questioning career employees on whether their job is necessary. It's been clear that the team of 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗏 are woefully underprepared, inexperienced, and unqualified for doing any of this. But moreover, they have access to every single American's social security number, birth date, address, employment history, bank account, tax info. But where could they get all this information? Well, the U.S. Treasury Department, the place where every government check that goes out is written. Elon's guys were there poking around a few days later when a judge told them they had to get out. But anyway, the issue with them being there is that they can get everything the U.S. government has on its citizens. Can you imagine what kind of value that would have to a foreign government? What I mean is, some of these very, very young men have no security clearance. You know, that's one thing. But moreover, Musk has access to his own competitors and their contracts with the U.S. government, what jobs they may hold and how they conflict with his. Also gets all their tax records. But this is not all the info he's got into. Also, the FAA, which he's been dismantling piece by piece. The FAA is the agency that regulates airplanes. Now, not that they are related, but since Trump took office, fired almost all of the managing staff from the FAA. We have had 3 major airplane crashes in Washington, in Philadelphia last week, and then one this week in Alaska. I don't know. I'm just saying. I mean, Elon's idea is that they fire everyone and then remove all regulations. And not just some regulations, but all regulations. He said, if we realize we need some of them back, well, we can just add them later. So regulations like food safety inspection, pharmaceutical drug testing, aviation guidelines, clean water testing, baby formula testing, waste treatment regulations. They're all on the chopping block. I mean, they went to the NOAA, the place that predicts the weather and climate predictions. Elon's team went in that office and they accessed their data. What are they looking for there? Supposedly info on diversity hires. And what about USAID? That agency, you know, the one that looks after the humanitarian efforts around the world, even in the Philippines? The agency that supplies food for starving children, drugs to keep HIV patients alive, responsible for refugee camps. Well, somehow they were able to initiate a worldwide shutdown completely of this agency. Food that was already delivered could not be given out, just sat there in the trucks. All the websites were shut down. Jobs for thousands of people that work for USAID were about to be eliminated. Well, a judge just a few days ago finally stepped in and put a temporary restraining order that basically stops Elon Musk from doing this for the moment. But they also went to the Department of Education. This is one of those things that's scary on many levels. They have sought to completely do away with the United States Department of Education and turn it over to the states. Can you imagine how that might turn out? What would the curriculum be in a Colorado or Massachusetts school versus an Alabama or Mississippi school? And this means they have access to all the student loan information. Last but not least, Elon set his sights on the U.S. Consumer Protection Agency. These are the people that protect the Americans against people like Elon Musk. They make sure banks and crypto companies and foreign companies are regulated to keep consumers' assets safe. Musk wants to shut down this agency. These are the people that were put there after the U.S. crash in the subprime mortgage market years ago. Make sure that anything like that never happens again. They make sure that your credit card fees are fair. You know, stuff like that. They're the people that look into businesses like, I don't know, Trump Incorporated, who recently lost $500 million in a lawsuit. Some experts have said this is a 5-alarm fire that people of America need to be worried about. Musk posted on X just last week, CFPB RIP. This scared a lot of people. I guess the question is, why would Elon Musk want to gut the U.S. government like this? And the answer that many have concluded is money. The richest man in the world stands to make tons of money if he can get rid of these agencies. Many of these places are there to make sure that companies like his follow the rules. And in the middle of all this, with this man from South Africa, Trump has just shut down all aid to South Africa. The reason? A law in South Africa to remove ownership of lands from white farmers. Now, South Africa denies that this is going on, but before, as we all know, it did because, well, white South Africans took it from the black South Africans when they colonized the region. Trump is saying because of the human rights violations in South Africa against the white people, he is withholding their aid. Yeah, You heard me right. Human rights violations against the white people in South Africa. In any case, this is where the U.S. is now. Court cases are flying around like pigeons in a bread factory. So as we try and figure out who is really in charge of the United States of America, we're trying to just soak it all in as the U.S. news goes on one day at a time. This is 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗏 on the World News Jam right here on DZRJ Radio and Radio Bandito TV. Remember the satellite Sputnik? Russia launched it in 1957. It was the first time someone put a satellite into space. It was 23 inches in diameter and could send radio signals back to Earth. It ran for 22 days until the batteries ran out. 3 months later, after 43 million miles of going around the Earth, it burned up in the atmosphere coming down. At the time, it was one of the most astonishing and amazing things ever. But then again, a decade later, the U.S. put a man on the moon. But at that time, the U.S. was totally embarrassed. Was Russia ahead of the U.S. in technology? Were they now the leader in technology? This past week, before, I guess, China came out with its new AI app, 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗏. And according to some, it's better than the American AI. And it's got everyone in America tech totally scared to death. China made something just as good as what America made, but made it way, way cheaper, and it took them way less time. Yep, that sounds like China. They said it cost around $5.6 million to get it up and running. So how much did ChatGPT cost? $1 billion? Oh my God, the U.S. is really freaking out now. Tech stocks dropped and people are jumping ship left and right. Meta, the Facebook company, said it spent $85 billion just this year on AI development. The CEO of OpenAI, the company that puts out ChatGPT, said it needs $1 trillion to support the development of the in-demand chips. It's nothing short of astonishing what China has been able to achieve. I mean, the U.S. has done everything possible to keep China from getting its hands on their technology. And now they have developed it on their own. Or have they? I mean, yes, it's cheaper. They made it quickly. But is it really so much better? The answer is maybe not. According to some published research, it's neither faster nor cleverer than ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude. The thing is, 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗏 claims that it reduced the amount of computation time required to train its model and the amount of memory they need to store it. Now, the computations to be able to train an AI, well, that's something we're not going to be able to talk about today. But what's interesting is how China managed to get those chips. Did they build them? They just modify some? If you remember before, and we talked about this here on the show, the Biden administration restricted China from getting access to U.S.-made NVIDIA chips. But China had stockpiles of them, so they just used them. Also, China doesn't have to adhere to, environmental regulations. It's something that the U.S. has to. And clearly, China has figured out to get ways to get around environmental impacts of running those chips. So only time will tell if China's new idea will actually deliver on its claims. And here's something interesting, is the open technical papers of how it works. This will enable other groups to run the model on their own equipment and adapt it to other tasks. This relative openness also means that researchers around the world are now able to peer beneath the model's bonnet to find out what makes it tick. Unlike OpenAI's, which is effectively a black box you can't see into. But there are still some details missing, such as data sets and code used to train the models. So groups of researchers are now trying to piece that whole thing together. And get this, it's free to use. This, along with the openness, will allow others to enter in the market, which is strange on several levels. While the U.S. companies are trying to put up barriers to keep people from making AI models, China is leaving the door wide open. I mean, before, AI was magic. AI was doing things we couldn't imagine before and was so very complex and we couldn't begin to understand it. But then China comes along and makes it so anyone could develop their own AI. It's predicted that AI will soon surpass humans in cognitive skills. Even Elon Musk said that by 2025, AI would be smarter than any human. The CEO of OpenAI said that it will replace humans as agents. In fact, years ago, they predicted AI would take over the task of radiologists and other, medical technicians. How much of this is true and how much of it is hype remains to be seen. But as time passes, and this enormous amounts of money are pouring into this technology. I mean, bigger data sets, building bigger models, deploying vaster computer power. Will the tech catch up with all this hype? And will DeepSeek live up to its hype? I mean, you can't ask it anything that shows any bad history of China or shows China in any kind of bad light, or it will auto-edit it. And think about this. If it was discovered in the U.S., in, say, a university, would it have the same worldwide acclaim it's getting right now just because it's coming out of China? Would the bottom be falling out of the U.S. tech stock market? It's kind of funny that this is happening right now, isn't it? Right now when we're on the verge of maybe a trade war with China. So we will wait and see how this new product really changes the market, or if it blends in and fades from the field of the AI giants. Right now, we all believe the DeepSeek is better. That even though ChatGPT can figure out things and learn what you want, how it does that? Well, it's a secret, and it costs some big money. Now, here comes along something similar, which supposedly can do it better, and it's free, and it tells you how it did it. But it's made in China. So is it safe to use? Is there something inside it like TikTok that's going to tell the Chinese something I don't want them to know? I love being dramatic. So DeepSeek open source AI model is matching the performance of the US AI at a fraction of the cost. But experts are saying it won't last because of the chips. Anyway, China showed the world that it can do more with less. Actually, they've been showing us that for years, but experts are saying it's just not going to last in the long term. In essence, the markets have overlooked that companies such as Google and Meta and OpenAI can replicate DeepSeek's efficiencies with scalable models, which they got better security and better privacy. Yet China shocked the world last week, but tomorrow, I don't know. And this is the World News Jam. Talking about stories going on around the world right here on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. Thank you so much for joining us today in our discussions, and we hope to see you again right here on the World News Jam. So for now, everybody be safe out there, and we will see you next week.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the